welcome to this special presentation. For those of you I don't know, though, looking around the room, I think I know most of you. I'm Jason Rich, Director of Marketing and Communication, and I'm also co-chair of the college's website redevelopment committee, along with Mark Berman, our Chief Information Officer. We're really excited today to kind of get you up to speed on how this year-long process of redesigning Siena.edu is going. And we have with us from FastSpot, who's been our partner throughout, Lucas Rowe, who's one of the designers there. And Lucas has a full presentation put together. So without further ado, I think I'll turn it over, and then we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. So I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about just because we've been doing this for like a year now. So there's a lot of exciting things happening. So I'm going to try to get through a lot of stuff. I'm hopefully not going to talk your ear off, and then we'll still have time for questions at the end. But I will occasionally stop to just ensure that everybody's on the same page and that I haven't just completely left everybody behind. So as Jason said, I'm Lucas. I'm from FastSpot. We're a design firm that largely does websites for higher ed and cultural institutions. We tend to find that a lot of colleges have sort of like, when they're looking at sites that they say, this is something that's really good and we want to do that. Accidentally happens to be our site. This is largely because we focus a lot on user experience, and we focus a lot on trying to make sites that aren't just a really pretty front page and a really pretty kind of prospective student getting in the door page, but also give you all the ability to make sites that give good journeys, good experiences. And so some of what we're going to be talking about today is not just here's what the new site design looks like, but also here's how you, the people who make the site, can bring this design system into the sort of page that you're going to be working with, which I know is a big challenge in the previous site and hopefully is going to evaporate entirely. So I wanted to talk a little bit just about where we are in the process so that we have an understanding of where it is that we are. So we tend to have a pretty solid, I guess you could call them these 5 phases. We are currently firmly in this phase, which you will notice somewhere near the end. So we've gone through a whole process of strategizing. We turned that into a creative brief that really helped us determine our assessment of who you all were and how we wanted to communicate through the site. And then we turned that into a strategy, and then we turned that into a visual design. And now we're in the process of doing the front-end development. If you aren't incredibly versed in web nerd terms, front-end development is sort of the styles and the visuals of the site that happen in code, and then the back end is making it work with the CMS, or the content management system. So we started on the content management system. If you aren't familiar with the content management system change, we're going to be using a content management system that FastSpot created that's called BigTree. There's a lot of different reasons behind the technical reasons that we did that. But basically what it means for you all is that it should be a lot easier for you to have kind of your section of the site where you go into it and you make your content for it, and you don't have to be either concerned about breaking the rest of the site or sending Mitzi 30 emails. So that's really our main goal here. So our goal is to be launching this in June. Development has been coming really quickly. Jason has apparently been looking at the development site and was telling me it's looking really good. And I'm just like, stop looking at it. It's not ready yet. This is the stuff that's ready, so this is what we're going to talk about. All right, so talking about the discovery process and the key takeaways. So this is really just trying to set a little bit of the framing for how we got to the design, just so that when we are talking about the design, we have something more to discuss than just the visuals. Because a good design process isn't just, hey, we put a pretty new skin on it and now you can take this and put it on a billboard. It also has messaging that underpins it. And since you all are doing so much work in that messaging, we want to make sure that we are aligned with that. So as I noted, after discovery, we always start with a creative brief. This is like a 13-page document that about 5 people read. But since I don't want you to have to read the whole thing to you all, I'm just going to highlight a couple things that came out of it. So one of the first things that we realized when we kind of came away from our on-sites last year is that in a lot of ways, like, you all don't have the same problems with your site that so many other colleges do. A lot of colleges bring us in because they're like, enrollment is falling and nobody knows who we are, what we stand for, and we don't know who we are, what we stand for, and we did not find that was the issue with you all. You've been doing well with enrollments. Siena, more than any other place I've ever been to, really knows who they are and kind of in their spirit and in their soul. And that comes through really, really well. So in the creative brief, the main questions that we wanted to try to answer with the site redesign is how do we explain Siena's value? College is kind of contentious because it's expensive, and there's a lot of students who don't know how they can justify that cost. So in Siena's case, how do you explain what that value is? You all know what the value is. Students may not know what that value is, and they're trying to figure out how to get that balance. How do we reach students we don't fully understand? So I don't know how much anybody tries to keep up with meme culture, but it's entirely impossible to figure out like where a kid's head is at any given time. They are evolving much more quickly than anybody can keep up with, even if you really try to. So reaching out to them is sort of a longer term process than just trying to kind of hit them exactly where they are. So we're trying to figure out, how do we bridge that gap? How do we talk directly to them? And then lastly, what does it mean to be a saint? So in our discovery process, when we were here on site, we didn't get a chance to talk to Brother Ed, which was very sad. But we had a phone call with him afterwards, and we felt very clever because we were going to be like, okay, Brother Ed will tell us exactly what it means to be Franciscan. And then we said, what does that mean to be Franciscan? And he just laughed at us because he said, you can't really explain what that is. It's so experiential that there's no way to just get a single sentence that's going to explain that. And so we had to kind of drop that hope and say, all right, well, we can't just write a sentence on the website that says this is what it means to be Franciscan. It has to be more experiential. It has to come through in the people and in the community, and so we can't just say, this is what Franciscanism means, have a nice day. So we have a lot of creative objectives. This is usually the part where in the creative brief we kind of say, here are the goals that we want to accomplish. There are a lot of these, and so I just picked a couple of them because not all of them are relevant to who we're talking to, to everybody basically. So first, we wanted to saturate the entire website with the Siena community. Everybody that we talked to, the first thing that they said about Siena is it's about the community, and the community is amazing. So we know that that needs to come across. We wanted to show your valuable and innovative interdisciplinary curriculum. There's a wonderful cultural movement that is talking about the value of a liberal arts education and how much better that is than trying to basically go to a technical school for a world that you don't really know what you're going to be doing in 5 or 10 years. Live Siena's commitment to be welcoming to all humans. This is really, really a lovely one. As somebody who works with a lot of colleges, it's really lovely to see how Franciscanism really underpins diversity well, because it's about, Franciscanism welcomes everybody by its very nature. And so it's not about, all right, we need to check a box to hit certain quotas. It's about, this is part of our mission and who we are as a movement, really. Explaining how Siena shapes well-rounded, sought-after graduates is tied into the interdisciplinary curriculum. It's sort of the, all right, we came from here, now we got to here, and that's what that means. Here are ones that are a little bit more relevant to you all. So we want to craft a site that creates an engaging and dynamic experience for its users, especially for prospective students. In the subtext for this objective, we talk about how a lot of the work that we're doing is for prospective students, but it also deeply applies to the staff, and it deeply applies to the current students. So we wanted a site that just felt better, that felt more engaging, but also had the ability for you to have an experience that really felt like you were getting to the right place and really quickly. We wanted to create a site that empowers Siena staff to build a modern, dynamic, and effective content. So we knew that the work that we were doing isn't basically just a poster. It's something that enables you all to kind of build these smaller sites that are relevant to the subjects that you all have to talk about, and in such a way that's not so frustrating. And lastly, we want to help Siena differentiate the value of its education, especially compared to SUNY schools. I think that one's kind of self-evident. Talking about the results and the value and the community that you all build. All right, so now we're going to talk about information architecture. By show of hands, how many of you know what information architecture means off the top of your head? That's a lot of marketing department. Okay, so information architecture comes from library science. Basically, it means that the website, everything has a place where it lives, everything has a name that's applied to it. And the information architecture is the study of putting those things in the correct place and labeling them correctly so that users can move through that structure and find the things that they need. So the first thing that we did, we went and made something, and we came back with this. And since this is super tiny text, I'm going to read it for you. So we started with this thing that was like, it basically was like the kind of 4 buckets you would expect from a college website, and then we underpinned it with some kind of what we were hoping was a more human language. So we were saying about and academics and admissions and financial aid and community and student life. And then we had some helpful links above and below, and this little thing over here that's called find that we're going to talk about later. It's really cool. And so basically our hope was, okay, we're just going to make a really nice informational site, and that will be fine. And that is not what we did. We completely abandoned it. The reason why we abandoned it is, first, it wasn't very user-centric. All right, we can jump to this one. So Jason, I mean, like, we gave our nice presentation. We were like, that felt nice. And then a couple days later, Jason came back and he said, you know, this is obviously very deeply considered, and we really appreciate it, and it's also not right. And we're sorry it's not right, but it's not right. And the reason why it wasn't right was because it wasn't very user-centric, and it just felt like more of the same thing. This actually, I mean, just kind of from a nuts and bolts standpoint, this actually really changed the way that Fastbot does information architecture. Because what we realized was happening is that we were kind of like going and making a bunch of decisions and then coming back with a recommendation, and that's not always correct. And if we had done earlier check-ins, we would have realized that what you all wanted and what you all were really hurting from your previous site was something that felt really radically user-centric, that really kind of got people to where they needed to go very quickly. And so, flatly, what we did previously wasn't doing that. So we went for a completely different direction. We wanted to make a site that was radically user-centric. We also needed a way to create a structure that allowed the departmental sites. So that previous one, you kind of would have to go through the same thing of like, you browse through to academics, and then you kind of get from there to an academics page, and then it takes you over to the academics site, and then you read about professors. It still was the same problem there. And then how can we simplify navigational tasks without ignoring that complexity? I actually just published a blog post on this last week, which is talking about, you know, everybody wants things to be 3 clicks from the homepage. But the problem is when you take a really big site with a dense information architecture and you smash it down to 3 clicks deep, it gets really wide, and it gets really shallow. And you have to make a lot of decisions early on in order to get someplace in a really short click path. So it might be less frustrating, but likely it's not, because you have to weigh so many options against each other, and it's really tough to do, and you have to read a lot of stuff. So this is kind of like what the previous site, and just a super oversimplification, this is kind of what the previous site was doing. It was very, very, very hierarchically based. And so it was saying, okay, we've got one monolithic site, or in your case, 2 kind of monolithic sites that kind of crossed over with each other. But we've basically got one information structure, and every page lives under another page, and that works for most purposes and not for all. And the idea that we came up with, and what we're going to be talking about today, is an idea that's a little bit closer to this. So instead of having a single giant site, instead what we were trying to do is say, okay, let's make a very small user-centered site, and let's give the departments and the schools and the institutes their abilities to make their small user-centered sites. And let's get people to those sites very quickly. So let's give them ways to navigate through that complexity. That's where that find menu is that we're going to be talking about later. You can tell that I'm excited about that. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. So there's going to be 2 parts to this. You'll notice that this is a little bit less like wireframe looking. This is the tool that we actually use to plan a lot of this stuff. It's called MindMeister. Technically, I'm not meant for this, but it does a pretty good job. So instead, what we have is a very simple kind of small site that is meant to get you to a different place. So it's supposed to bring you in, it's supposed to tell you who Siena is, it's supposed to give you some information about how you get involved, what the academics are, and it's supposed to get you to the correct place. Whether that's a departmental site or that's, you know, a HubSpot form, whatever that is, it's supposed to teach you quickly and then move you somewhere else. So we have a simple top level that starts with academics, life as a saint, visit, apply, and afford. We have a toolbar that says information for, and it has information for prospective students, and faculty and staff, and alumni. We have a little find menu, and then we have a couple links underneath the footer that are just trying to like round it out and give a little bit of extra context. Underpinning that, and this is going to be a very dense looking slide, is this nerdy looking thing. What this is going to be is this is basically, I'm not showing this to you to like try to bring any clarity, but just to kind of show that what this is doing is it's planning out the way that the URLs are going to work. One structure that we needed to figure out really early on was, if you take the site and you break it out to all these small sites, how do you make it so that in order to get somewhere you don't have to go like, you know, this slash that slash this slash that slash this slash institute or something like that. So this is basically, we're trying to figure out how you can still have short, understandable URLs for users so that when you all are sending somebody to, say, your departmental site, you can send them to something like, trying to figure out what the pattern is specifically for that. But the point is you can send them siena.edu/something instead of having to send them, you know, an 80-character long URL in order for them to get somewhere. Okay, that's all we were going to talk about for information architecture. I'm going to take a brief breath of air, and see if we have any questions before we start talking about the visual design. I saw knitted eyebrows and yet no hands. Okay, we'll come back for questions later.
Knitted eyebrows, so it's squinting.
Squinting.
Yeah.
It is some tiny text. It was already small text, and then this has, you know, the resolution of like, I don't know. Okay, so for the design, I have one extremely helpful slide under design that says design preview, because we're actually going to go look at the design in a different tool. And if I just swipe over here, okay. So this is a prototype, so please do not expect this to actually, like, this does not mean the site is done. This is just a prototyping tool. But essentially, this is what we're going to be looking at for the new homepage. So this is what the homepage will look like. It's not indicative of the whole design system. We're only going to look at a couple pages just because we did a lot of design of like data categories basically, and not all of that is super relevant right now.